Welcome to The Writer's Dream. This is a show where authors can talk about how they write their books, how they publish their books, and how they market their books. You can see us on YouTube, just look for The Writer's Dream. You can see us on a Facebook page. Guess what the name of the page is? The Writer's Dream. We've been doing this for about 9 years now, and if you go on YouTube, you'll see about 200 author interviews. If you are a writer, or you're interested in becoming a writer or a reader and you want to see some very good local talent, please tune in to The Writer's Dream. Our guest today is Brian Heinz. Brian Heinz is one of the foremost children's writers on Long Island. You've probably heard his name before, or if you're young enough, you've seen him in schools. Maybe old enough and you've seen him in schools. He's a retired elementary school teacher who concentrated in science and language arts. He was a history professor, he was a professor at Hofstra for 10 years teaching writing. Also does writing workshops, yes?
Yes.
And he is one of the founders of LICWI, Long Island Children's Writers and Illustrators. Several of the people from that organization have been on the show, and we've talked about what they do, and we actually promote children's writers and illustrators. We, before COVID, did events in schools. We did fairs in schools where we could sell our books. So Brian has a brand new book out, and it's a departure from his regular books, so it's an exciting new project. So Brian, without further ado, tell us about Peabody Pond.
Peabody Pond is a blend of mystery, suspense, science fiction, horror, and humor, with an eclectic cast of characters. The departure you mentioned is correct. Almost all of my books are picture books, not just for younger readers, but picture books for older readers, and there is always some kind of a science content or environmental content involved, whether I'm writing an adventure story like The Wolves or Nanook, Lord of the Ice, or something much more bucolic and a mood piece like Butternut Hollow Pond.
Yeah.
It's based upon my interests from the time I was a child, out there in the woods and exploring long before Long Island was built up anywhere near what it is now. And my home in the Adirondacks brings me another massive information to deal with, the environment up there, the animals that are up there. And I would say some of the characters, I don't think there's an author who's ever written a book that hasn't thrown a piece of themselves into it.
Oh, absolutely.
So some of the rather chaotic scenes and little bits of mayhem that going on between the two lead characters, Connor and Otis, very much mirror myself and some of my friends growing up, where we would be out there unbeknownst to our parents, miles from home, finding an old rotten rowboat on the side of a pond, getting in it. By all rights, I should have been drowned 50 years ago and dead. But
those were the days when we didn't have helmets and seat belts.
Those are the days you can get on your bike and ride for 30 miles with your friends, and nobody was worried about being abducted or hit by a car or any of that nonsense.
Come home when the street lights come on.
Exactly, right, yeah. Be home by dinner. Yes, Mom.
Exactly.
So those boys brought me back to my own childhood, my friends, my explorative activities in the outdoors. I ended up teaching outdoor education for many years, both elementary and at middle school level, and teaching writing and science. So that's the marriage of my two great loves.
It all comes together, right?
Yeah.
I felt the same way about my books, in that my teaching forensic science and my love of Nancy Drew and mysteries and whatnot, that all came together, plus my love of history. I try to put history in all of my books, so that's what happens with authors. Authors take pieces of their lives and put them together and hopefully tell a good story. I have to make a comment about your the books before Peabody Pond. if you haven't had a chance to see one of Brian's books, they are pictorially so beautiful that you, even as an adult, in fact, most adults love children's books because it brings them back to their childhood. Take a look at Brian's picture books. Can you give us a little bit about the plot? First of all, what age level is the book for, and how old are Connor and Otis?
For RV Publishing, they're headquartered in Oklahoma, and they're one of only a handful of publishers who do tweens and teens level books that are in the horror thriller genre. There's only about a dozen publishers out there. So I found them, I took a shot, and they grabbed it on first read. Those characters are at the cusp of going into 8th, 9th grade. So the tweens and teens, those books are targeted for anywhere from 5th grade up to YA. It's
And
a
they're
broad
like
spectrum.
an older hero.
But a number of adults, including librarians, other teachers, have already read the book through, some of them in one sitting, and adults are going to glean a great deal. Many YA books are read by adults.
Oh, sure.
So I'm very pleased that I found them. Peabody Pond in particular, I don't want to compare myself to James Michener, but I know when we're doing a
You don't
revision
have
process.
enough
No, it's not, yeah. James Michener books
I
can be a
know.
murder weapon. But there was one discourse between myself and one of the editors where they said, you spend several pages here on Peabody Pond in particular, and its description, like a splatter of paint or an oversized amoeba, and all. She said, you know, the
Detail.
exposition is absolutely beautiful, but is it necessary? And I said, as you continue on into it, Peabody Pond basically is an environmental character. That's how I look at it. It's a non-living thing, but because of Peabody Pond, because of these incredibly unique characteristics it has, it plays a big part in what can and cannot transpire in a novel. And James Michener, with some of his blockbusters like Centennial or Hawaii, his opening chapters, he spends dozens of pages talking about the upheaval of the earth and the volcanic activity. He's laying the groundwork for how this environment was created before he even brings his characters into it. So again, not comparing myself to Michener, but that pond has some unruly characteristics of its own, and it was critical to have that portrayed in the book and drawn out. But everything is seen through Connor and Otis's eyes.
Right, right. Oftentimes, people will ask me if I do a workshop or whatever, how do you deal with writer's block? You do an interview, and I say, go to your setting. Go to your setting and really start researching it and describing it, and that's going to take you right back into your plot.
Yeah, I laugh because talking about writer's block, and I don't remember if it was Isaac Asimov or Ray Bradbury, one of them, was asked that question by an interviewer, and they said, what happened? Did you ever experience it? And he said, yes, but it doesn't last long. And the interviewer asked him, well, what do you do? He said, I burned somebody's house down. And then I figure out who did it and why, and what does it have to do with my story. And basically, it's the what if. What if this happened? And you push yourself along, and that's the key. Make something happen, and then tie it in with your characters, with your theme, with your plot.
Okay, so you're, from what I read on the book blurb, okay, the theme is really something that happens to the environment of Peabody's Pond.
Correct.
And you can go into that as deeply as you want to or not.
I didn't want to go into the kind of depth that you find in something like Jurassic Park or the Andromeda Strain. It wasn't necessary. I didn't want to pull too much away from the interplay with the characters. You got a lot of people involved, from this wily old hermit they all think is a lunatic, the two kids who are, they're smart as all hell, but they're risk takers. And that's going to
They're
be part of the
adventurous.
problem. Yeah, but they need to have a comeuppance, and they bite off more than they can chew. They're a little bit cocky in their attitude. They make snap judgments about people without seeing the depth of the other person's personality, the nature of who that person really is. All of that has to come out because they're going to not just go through physical changes, but there's a metamorphosis in their thinking process and how they view the people around them and the world they live in. And I think any good novel has to do that. There has to be some kind of an internal growth. So, and it's not just with those kids, it's with the old hermit, it's with the annoying older sister, there's sibling rivalry, there's just a obnoxiously mean-tempered bully in the school, Bump Hansen, and how do you bring all of these people together in an alliance? And it was part of the fun, but it was also part of the difficulty, you know. So there's a lot of problem solving that goes on when you're working on a novel because you've got a lot of contrary threads that have to be pulled together.
I know, yes. So I think one of the important themes in books for young people is the growth of characters, because that's one of the things that, I mean, you want to tell a story, but the story is, I think, most enjoyable and most satisfying when the character has an aha moment, and some changes are affected by it. That makes the story. First of all, I really think that when you write for kids, whether they be little kids or middle kids or even high school kids should be reading adult literature. I think that what you have to do is make the characters lovable. And by that I mean you have to be able to relate to them. If you can't relate to the characters, the story may be very interesting, but you're not going to want to read the next book with those characters.
Exactly. In fact, most people, if they haven't made a connection with the characters by the third or fourth page, there's a good chance the book is going to be closed. I've seen editors do it. I've seen agents do it because they weren't pulled in immediately. And even when I'm doing writers' workshops, it doesn't matter whether it's middle school, college students, adults. I have 5 basics that have to appear on my opening page. Introduce the characters by name, personalize them, create the setting, rich sensory detail. You want that reader to vicariously experience the setting these kids are in. Create an action. Doesn't mean drive a car off a cliff, but the action could be as simple as jumping into an old rowboat, but immediately you want something visual. And finally, if not openly, at least intimate that there's a problem. There's some kind of tension going on. And all of that happens on the opening page of Peabody Pond, where they're looking across at the old cabin with the lights out, and they hear the slam of the screen door, and right away there's a comment. It's the old fossil, you know. I go, what?
Who lives there?
Yeah, and they're studying the house, and you can feel their nervousness. And then right away they go down this rotted old dock, the thing's teetering under their feet, and immediately, you know, this is fun to them. So immediately, within the first page or two, their risk-taking penchant is there.
Right.
You're seeing all of that, and now at some point, I've planted the idea about this old hermit up on the hill, and who is it? And we get to that. It doesn't take long. I just received an email this morning from a librarian who read it in one sitting, and she said, I can't wait to recommend this to my middle school students. The action starts on the first page. And I think she used, the 2 boys are adorable. So that's it. You had to like these kids.
Exactly. That's the key. That's the key. And folks who are watching this show, I hope you listen to the last 2 or 3 minutes of what Brian just said, because this is the key to good novel writing. And just listen and write it all down, because that's what you do. I know when I first started to write, because writing was never important to me until all of a sudden it was. And so I took a couple of courses in novel writing, but when I start my book, it's always action. My main character, Annie, is on the move somewhere. And within the first few pages, she's butted up against something. You know, that oh, I think I'm curious about this, or I'm frightened by it, or something that's action and beautiful settings.
And kids like that little bit of risk-taking, doing what's wrong. Not that they're bad kids, but you open up a novel, and the first scene, it's 2 a.m., and the kid is sliding outside the window to the ground on his blanket and is waiting a moment to see if anybody's awake. You're like, holy smoke, what's so important? They had to get up in the middle of the night. Where are they going? It doesn't take much to punch that curiosity button. Because I would be interested. Where is she going?
Well, and not only that, but even if you're not, as a kid, brave enough to do that, you wish you were. Because people ask me if Annie Tillery is me, and I said, no, Annie Tillery is the teenager I would have loved to have been, but I was
yeah,
too.
there's that vicariousness again. You know, you want them. I want them to feel that blanket sliding through their hands. All of that. I want to feel the beads of sweat on their forehead. The sounds, anything that places them in that scene, in that moment, is important. Emotional senses, or any one of the 5 physical senses, but it needs to be in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you do your school programs, primarily, I've never seen one of your school programs.
Oh, you missed something.
I know. I next time you have one, next year's on time.
I've had a number of visitors because I actually have 5 different programs. I run my full-blown dynamic assembly program, which ties in a lot with, most of my books are written on location. I mean, for a book like Nanook, my polar bear book, in order to get a sense of the hunting sled with the Inuit hunter, young boy, I was on an overland dog sled at 20 below zero, and I mean, my face mask froze into my beard, but I felt the buckling of the sled bumping over the ice, the dogs howling and yapping, and the slap of the leather. I don't need to take that dog sled ride again and again and again, because experiences like that, if you're tuned in, you internalize it. I can go back and be on that dog sled anytime I want and remember it. Remember that, you know, trying to pull wool out of my beard, frozen solid. Those are, not all of that gets into the book, but that's what's important. I collect sensory details. Now, children that I visit schools, they talk about research. They think research is look it up on the internet, write it down, and put it in their story. But, you know, when I tell them I spent 10 days in the Cheyenne River Canyon with 350 wild horses, or hiked in wolf country, or whatever the case may be, it's unique. And it's not just being there physically and checking the environment. You need to talk to the people, the Native Americans who were there, the ranchers who live on the land. I learned details from them that I couldn't have found in any book. Nicknames for plants, everything.
Exactly.
These people have a wealth of knowledge that I can draw from and dump into my book where it's appropriate.
Yeah, I agree with you. You have to. 3 of my books are local. They're either New York City or they're Long Island, but one of them was Turkey, and I had to go to Turkey. First of all, I had to get the names of Turkish people for my characters. Turkish is not an easy language. You know, it's not like Jose or, you know, a French name or a Spanish name. Turkish is a difficult language. So I was able to pick up what it says on the stop sign.
Exactly.
And what they call a street, and just things like that.
Well, even a book like Kayaktuk, which is a coming of age tale, people see this and they think that's the kid. The kid's name is Aknik. It's actually the Inuit word for a specific Arctic animal, the Arctic fox. And its literal translation means shadow without a body. There are Inuit words sprinkled throughout this to the point where my publisher decided to put a 2-page glossary in the back with those Inuit words, the pronunciation, and what they meant. It's not necessary to look at the glossary because the context pretty much
tells you what
unveils the word anyway. Right. But I know you're asking about the programs. I do writing workshops from elementary, middle school, high school, and college age. I do adult writing programs, and I have 2 different keynote programs that I do. So where some people, they write only for the K2 group, very early picture books, it limits the audience. I'm able to do kindergarten to adult.
Right.
And I'm comfortable with all of them because I spent so many years teaching, speaking in public and running writing workshops and running science workshops with teachers. So the more programs you have, I think the more avenues
Right.
are
I
provided
agree.
for you.
I agree with that. Yeah, because I mean, what I've done is I branched out into doing lectures on topics in forensic science, and now actually my latest one is on plagues. Can you imagine? But it broadens my audience too, because my books give me one audience, my lectures give me another. And actually, I could take my lectures and, because I taught science like you, and just gear them down. So yeah, that helps you out as an author, because you once you, and this is my next topic, once you write that book and it's produced, how do you get people to know it's there? That's the marketing part. That's the difficult part. So doing workshops is one way to do it. How else do you do it?
Well, I have my website. In fact, yesterday I returned home from my house in the Adirondacks, and there was a book order printed out from my website by a woman in Mississauga, Ontario, Canada, for 3 books. And I signed them and wrapped them up. We emailed back and forth, and they're on their way. And a school that I visited a number of years ago, St. Clement's parochial school in Saratoga Springs, I have an email from that woman and an order form she sent out for 3 other books, 3 of my picture books, and said that I remember that school, it was beautiful. She said I had left such an impression on her 3rd grade students, they still talk about me. And she said, yours are some of the most beautiful picture books and my favorite books that I've ever read. So she ordered 3. So just having the website is a big leg up, but I'm on Facebook now. I fought against it for quite a few years. My publishers wanted me to do a blog. I need time for my life.
Yeah, I know.
And if I start doing blogs, and it's like, enough. I haven't posted videos on YouTube. I have enough to keep me busy. I've managed to do some outdoor signings out on the East End and upstate New York to keep things rolling. But from my school visits, I normally sign, it could be as many as 2,500, 3,000 books a year just for my school visits.
Right.
So that's gone.
That's gone, I know.
That's gone. Newspaper articles help. One of the upstate newspapers is preparing an article on me now, so they'll mention me, my books, my website. All of my books have my website on it, so if a person does read one of my books and loves it, there's my website, and they can go right to it and access
Right.
whatever they need to know. So
I find interviews are important, and they say start local, and so I mean that's what I've done. And then I've also done things like the author show, and the woman who runs that, she's very good about advertising your stuff. I mean, I have found people on the internet who will advertise my stuff for me,
Right.
which is helpful because you have to direct people to your website. And I use my Facebook pages basically to direct people to interviews and to my website, and so that's helpful.
even emails, everybody has a
Yeah.
cluster of email addresses, and you pick and choose. You send out the announcement on a book. I attached a photograph, an image of it with the blurb, and I've had dozens and dozens of orders come in from that, and then you count on those people to pass it on to people who aren't on your list, and that's the networking part. And
Right.
thank goodness for those people.
Yeah, well, I have a newsletter that I send out probably once a month, and and usually what I do is I feature one of my books, but then I also feature one of the authors. You'll eventually end up on my newsletter. So, and I know what your website is and whatnot. So I put that up there, and I find it's networking. I also find this show helpful because I'll be in a restaurant sometimes and people come up to me and I'll say, "Do I know you? You look so familiar." And I know I don't know them, but they see me. They probably see me on the show. Every once in a while, somebody will say, "I saw you on Cablevision." And the Cablevision show, evidently people do watch Channel 20 on Cablevision, and they'll say that.
It's
So
funny.
you'll be on Cablevision. You'll be, you'll get your advertising.
When you do such an enormity of school visits, like I do, we were at a funeral in Nassau County,
I'm sorry.
and
I
a
shouldn't
little
have-
boy in the front row kept nudging his mother and pointing back, and the mother was, stop, 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 And finally she came over and she said, "Excuse me, my son thinks you're some big shot author. Would you please tell him you're not?" And I said, "I don't know about the big shot part, but I said, I am an author." And right away, "See, Ma, I told you, it's Mr. Heinz." So it happened at Shea Stadium before it
wow.
closed. It's happened at Citi Field. It's happened in restaurants. It's just, it's amazing. Kids see you and parents see you. Like if I'm speaking to a conference of 200 people, they all remember me.
You don't remember
But
them,
they're
I
all
know.
faceless because
know.
you can't
I
focus
know.
and zero in. So my wife is always telling me, "You always have to behave. You can't get mad on the road. You can't make faces or yell something because you don't know who knows you out there." I said, I know.
Well, it's been really a pleasure to have you on, and I wish you the best of luck with this, and I hope that very soon we'll be seeing each other at book events in schools, and I know this is going to be big. This is going to be a
Well,
wonderful.
I just want to point out one little thing that
do it quickly.
Adana Willow-Raven was the art director, so she designed the cover, and there's just enough on it to provide mystery with the label on the test tube, the vial, but I just love the way she used the biohazard symbol
Yeah.
for the O in pond,
Yeah.
because that's you can't look at that and say, uh-oh, because the title Peabody Pond, it sounds like, oh my gosh, what a beautiful bucolic setting this must be. So, anyway.
That's a wrap.